It might look like a crumbling ruin in the middle of the manor housing estate, but Sheffield Manor Lodge played an important part in this country's history. Mary, Queen of Scots, was imprisoned there in the 1500s. Sheffield Castle and Manor Lodge were the two grandest buildings in Sheffield. Both were owned by the successive Earls of Shrewsbury. The stone-built castle was a large defensive structure that dominated the town, and the Manor Lodge was built in 1510, originally as a hunting lodge in the Earl's Deer Park, but by the 1570s it had been rebuilt into a large and impressive manor house. Little is known about the manor by most people in Sheffield, but in fact Mary, Queen of Scots, was imprisoned there in the 1500s. Mary had abdicated the Scottish throne and fled to England in 1568, but she was considered a threat to Queen Elizabeth I of England and locked up for 19 years until her execution in 1587. The Scottish Queen wasn't thrown into a gloomy cell though. She resided in Sheffield for much of her imprisonment under the care of George Talbot, 6th Earl of Shrewsbury. Queen Elizabeth I of England had changed England from being a Catholic country back to being Protestant again, and as a result she had many enemies. Mary, Queen of Scots, was born a Catholic in Scotland in 1542. Her father was James V of Scotland, who died 6 days after Mary was born. England remained a Protestant country, but Mary had a strong claim to the English throne and therefore posed a threat to Queen Elizabeth I because of the marriage of Elizabeth's father Henry VIII to Anne Boleyn, which was viewed by Catholics as illegal. Scotland was a different story though. While Mary had been spending her young life in France, Scotland had become a Protestant country again. So being Catholic, Mary wasn't popular with the Scots. They especially turned against her when she married Lord Bothwell, who had been the chief suspect in the murder of her previous second husband, Lord Darnley. It was at this point, in around 1569, that Mary fled Scotland for England, hoping to get help and support from her cousin Queen Elizabeth I. But Elizabeth was worried that Mary would raise Catholic support and take the throne, so she put Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, under lock and key for the next 19 years. She was placed under the care of George Talbot, the 6th Earl of Shrewsbury. This is where Sheffield comes in. Much of Mary's imprisonment was spent at Sheffield Castle and Manor Lodge under the care of the Earl of Shrewsbury and his wife Bess of Hardwick, aka Elizabeth Talbot, Countess of Shrewsbury. Sheffield Castle no longer exists, but Manor Lodge Turret House and other ruins still stand just off City Road in Sheffield, in the middle of the Manor Estate. You can go and see it any time you like. When the treasures of the V&A exhibition came to Sheffield's Millennium Gallery in 2009, some important pieces of Sheffield's history were put on show. They included embroideries by Mary and Bess Hardwick and several letters from Mary. One of the letters was loaned to the Millennium Gallery from a private collection, 2 from Sheffield Archives and 1 from the Lambeth Palace Archives. The embroideries by Mary, her servants and Bess of Hardwick were on loan from the V&A in London. Mary was determined to be freed from her captivity in Sheffield on the grounds that as a queen she was wrongfully imprisoned and no threat to the Queen Elizabeth in England, so she wrote to friends, supporters, nobility, kings and queens during her 19 years captivity to try and gain support for her release. 2 of the letters, which went on show at Treasures from the V&A, usually held by Sheffield Archives, were written to the Laird of Barnbarrock in April and May 1571. The 3rd letter, to Lord Burleigh, dated 1572, was on loan from a private collection. In a separate letter from the Earl of Shrewsbury to William Cecil, Baron Burleigh, dated 24th of September 1572, the Earl writes, "These are to advertise you that this Queen remains still within the 4 walls in sure keeping, and these persons continue very quiet. Thanks be to God. She is much offended at my restraint from her walking without this castle, but for all her anger I will not suffer her to pass out of these gates." Baron William Cecil Burleigh organised a spy system in 1570, and in fact it was he who eventually took responsibility for Mary's execution in 1587. Burleigh was Queen Elizabeth's secretary and the Treasurer of England. Mary wrote the letter to Burleigh while imprisoned in Sheffield. In it, she thanks him for allowing her to receive a gift from her grandmother, Duchess Antoinette of Guise. Mary's grandmother had played an important part in her young life in the French court. Mary passed a lot of time during her imprisonment embroidering with her host, Bess of Hardwick, who was an accomplished needlewoman. Many of Bess's embroideries are still on show at Hardwick House in Derbyshire. In another letter from Queen Elizabeth to the Earl and Countess of Shrewsbury dated, Queen Elizabeth informs the Earl of Shrewsbury and the Countess how grateful she is to them for guarding Mary. She says that the debt she owes them is as great as the sovereign can owe to a subject, and that the peace of the realm is maintained by keeping Mary in prison. One of the pieces which was on show at Sheffield Millennium Gallery on loan from the V&A London was of a monkey or an ape. Mary and Bess often use pictures from books as inspiration for their needlework. The monkey is embroidered in linen, silk and gold tissue on velvet, and it was based on a woodcut from Historium Animalarium 1560 by Conrad Gesner. Mary's initials, MR, are embroidered under the monkey's table. Another of the pieces shows Mary's pet dog Jupiter. Others include symbolic messages that reflected how she felt about her captivity in Sheffield. The Duke of Norfolk, hence the name Norfolk Park in Sheffield, was an admirer of Mary, Queen of Scots, and planned to marry her, but Queen Elizabeth I of England would have had to approve, and she didn't. The Duke of Norfolk still kept up his contact with Mary though. It was with his help and others of the Catholic nobility that Mary was able to plot against Elizabeth while she was not being too closely guarded in Sheffield. Eventually, a letter from Mary to Thomas Babington was intercepted. It implicated Mary in a plot to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I of England. Some say that Mary was set up Others think she was at the heart of the plot to take the English throne from Elizabeth. Whatever the true version of events, Mary was beheaded for treason, and it was Lord Burleigh, who she'd written to previously, who was responsible for her execution. In the years after Mary had left Sheffield Manor, the Earl of Shrewsbury passed it into the hands of the Duke of Norfolk, and in the early 17th century the building began to fall into disrepair.